e-reader wars are most definitely heating up. Barnes & Noble and Amazon are bracing for the impact of Apple's iPad, due to be released this Saturday. Joining us now with more on the developing story is David Garrity, a principal at GVA Research. David, always good to have you here. We've been talking so much about what Apple is doing. Let's talk a bit about what the competitors are doing. I've got the Kindle right here. This is not the most sophisticated Kindle. There is, of course, the bigger, more souped-up version of the Amazon Kindle. But, of course, there's also the Nook from Barnes & Noble. There's the e-reader or the reader from Sony. Why so little response from these competitors with all the time that we've been waiting for the iPad to come out?
Well, in some respects, it's like negotiating against yourself. And obviously, you want to see how well the iPad itself is launched into the market, what kind of volumes there actually are. And we have actually seen one price response, but at the low end of the range. Sony, with their e-reader, had the Pocket Edition, which was priced at $200. They dropped the price point to $170, basically going into the April 3rd launch. No guarantees after that. But with respect to Amazon on the Kindle or with Barnes & Noble on the Nook, we haven't seen any movement off those price points, and both of those remain at about $259 or so at the low end of the range, well below what Apple's going to have on the iPad at $499.
David, I call them competitors, but are they really competitors? These are, for the most part, single-use devices. You read books on them.
Exactly.
The iPad is going to offer us books, magazines in a much more interactive way. Isn't it effectively creating a new category? Should we look at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Sony, at least what they're offering us right now, as something entirely separate and perhaps not threatened as much by Apple's iPad?
Well, for the time being, not so. Because, I mean, Apple with their iPad iterations, when they come out with the next generations, you'll obviously have greater functionality going beyond what they're already going to have. Yes, there is a difference between the products. However, the main reason that people are going to have to buy the iPad, in some respects, is going to be drawn to the same type of functionality that you've got with a Kindle right now, the ability to read digital content online rather than basically staying with old printed versions. And that really is the main motivation. What we're looking at right now, though, I think it's more important for investors to consider is what are the competitive dynamics going to be amongst these companies, not just based on the hardware, but looking more at what the content offerings there are. And in that respect, what's going on between Amazon and Apple is probably going to be most significant.
What do you mean between Amazon and Apple and the significance of it? Elaborate just a little.
Certainly. Following on the October 2007 introduction of the Kindle, you've got a situation now with Amazon where they've built up approximately 500,000 book titles online. You've got approximately 50 magazines. You've got over 100 newspapers. You've got 9,000 blogs. From that standpoint, granted, Apple knows how to build digital content online. We saw that with the iTunes Store. The question is, how rapidly can they take what Amazon has already put online and match that? And at the same time, look at what Barnes & Noble has. Barnes & Noble just appointed a new CEO, Bill Taylor, on the 18th of March. He had basically been responsible for launching their e-book store, also their Nook. Expect Barnes & Noble to probably make some fairly substantial advances in terms of more books being made available in digital formats.
David, I want to go back to the price issue for just a moment. How sensitive are consumers to price in this category, the e-reader, touch tablet market? Because, as you pointed out, Sony just cut the very, very bottom end of its range, and that's really not going to compete that directly with the iPad. Does it really matter what these things are priced at? It
will matter. It will matter. I mean, not that I'll draw any direct studies in terms of what price elasticity looks like in terms of the e-reader market, but there have been some decent work done recently out of J.P. Morgan talking about price elasticity of demand in the smartphone market. And there you've got a price elasticity factor of about 3.3 times, which says that for every 1 percentage point change in the price, you'll change the consumption in terms of volume, units, by about 3.3 times. So in this respect, price elasticity of demand is a very significant element. There has been some work in terms of talking about the e-reader market that to find mass adoption, you might have to see the price points actually drop down to $50. And at that point in time, you start asking what kind of subsidy might there be.
Very, very briefly, do you expect prices to follow Apple's program, let's say, that they've had with the iPhone, that you add functionality and drop the price as you go generation to generation?
I would certainly expect that to be the case. We've seen it work out in other hardware categories. I think you might actually see Amazon and, to some extent, Barnes & Noble and Sony come out faster than Apple. That's where the real competitive dynamic in hardware will be.
David, it's going to be an exciting Saturday when the Apple iPad finally ships. Thank you for joining us.